The Dark Secret. Chapter 1. The Beginning of Darkness. In the small, isolated town of Blackwood, Maine, where time seemed to have stopped, something dark and unsettling was about to be unearthed. Blackwood, with its quiet streets and old houses, harbored a secret buried for decades. The townspeople lived their daily lives, unaware of the shadow looming over them, ready to be revealed. Thomas Hale, a young journalist who had returned to his hometown after years working in a big city, was determined to start over. Thomas had moved back to Blackwood to take care of his ailing grandmother and hoped to find some peace and quiet away from the urban hustle. Thomas's return coincided with a series of strange events in the town. Reports of disturbing dreams, inexplicable disappearances, and a growing sense of unease among the residents began to surface. Curious and unsettled, Thomas decided to investigate these occurrences, which seemed to be connected in some way. As he explored the town and spoke with the locals, Thomas uncovered an old story about a mysterious house at the end of Maple Street. The house, an imposing and dilapidated mansion, had been abandoned for years and was known among the locals as haunted. It was said that something terrible had happened there, and few had the courage to approach it. Driven by curiosity and a need to understand what was happening in Blackwood, Thomas decided to investigate the mansion. He spent the afternoon exploring the property, noting the signs of decay and the traces of a dark past. The atmosphere of the house was oppressive, and Thomas felt a strange sense of déjà vu as he wandered through the dusty corridors. However, the true discovery came when Thomas found an old journal hidden in a secret drawer. The journal was filled with disturbing entries and enigmatic drawings, hinting at something sinister that had occurred in the house. As Thomas read through the pages, he realized that the journal might hold the key to unraveling the mystery behind the dark events plaguing Blackwood. Thomas's curiosity was piqued, and he knew that he had only scratched the surface of something much larger. The journal's cryptic messages and unsettling illustrations pointed to a hidden truth that had been concealed for far too long. Determined to uncover the full story, Thomas vowed to delve deeper into the mansion's past and find out what really happened in Blackwood. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. Thomas Hale's investigation into the mansion and its dark history had only just begun. Armed with the journal he had found, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The journal's disturbing entries hinted at a history of secrecy and malevolence, and Thomas was determined to uncover the truth behind the shadows that haunted Blackwood. The next morning, Thomas visited the local library, hoping to find additional information about the mansion and its previous occupants. He met with the librarian, Mrs. Eleanor Burke, an elderly woman with a sharp mind and a keen interest in the town's history. She had lived in Blackwood her entire life and knew the town's past better than anyone. Mrs. Burke was initially hesitant to discuss the mansion, but after Thomas mentioned the journal, her demeanor changed. She led him to a back room filled with old records, newspapers, and historical documents. As Thomas sifted through the dusty files, Mrs. Burke shared what she knew about the house. The mansion had once belonged to the Hawthorne family, wealthy industrialists who had moved to Blackwood in the early 1900s. The family was known for their philanthropy and their extravagant lifestyle. However, their fortunes took a drastic turn when a series of tragic events began to plague them. Rumors of madness, murder, and occult practices surrounded the Hawthornes, and the mansion became synonymous with darkness. One of the most unsettling stories was about the family's youngest daughter, Elizabeth Hawthorne. According to local lore, Elizabeth had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and her fate was never discovered. The mansion had been abandoned shortly after her disappearance, and the Hawthorne family vanished from the town's records. Armed with this new information, Thomas returned to the mansion. He carefully examined the journal's entries, trying to match them with the historical facts he had uncovered. The journal mentioned a hidden room and sacrifices in the shadows, which Thomas believed might be connected to the mansion's dark history. As he explored the mansion further, Thomas discovered a concealed door behind a faded tapestry in the library. The door led to a narrow staircase that descended into a dimly lit basement. The air was thick with dust and mildew, and the temperature dropped significantly as he descended.
In the basement, Thomas found a room that had been untouched for decades. The walls were lined with shelves filled with strange artifacts, old books, and ritualistic items. In the center of the room was a large, intricately carved altar, covered in dust and cobwebs. The altar was adorned with symbols and markings that matched some of the drawings in the journal. Thomas's heart raced as he examined the altar and the surrounding items. He felt a sense of foreboding, as if he had stumbled upon something deeply sinister. The journal's references to ancient rites and the darkness within took on a new level of significance in this context. He took photographs of the artifacts and made detailed notes, intending to research their origins and significance later. As he was about to leave the basement, Thomas heard a faint, echoing sound coming from the walls. It was a soft, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat. His curiosity got the better of him, and he traced the sound to a hidden compartment within the wall. Inside, he found a small, ornate box sealed with a lock. The box was intricately decorated with symbols that matched those on the altar. Thomas took the box with him, feeling both exhilarated and uneasy. He knew that he had uncovered something crucial, but the full extent of its significance remained unclear. As he left the mansion, he resolved to continue his investigation and unravel the mystery of the dark secret that had haunted Blackwood for so long. Chapter 3: Echoes of the Past. Thomas Hale's discovery of the ornate box in the mansion's basement was both thrilling and unsettling. The box, sealed with cryptic symbols, felt heavy in his hands, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it contained something of immense importance. Back at his temporary home, Thomas carefully examined the box under the light of his desk lamp. Its surface was engraved with intricate patterns and symbols, many of which matched those he had seen on the altar in the mansion's basement. The box was locked with a small, rusted padlock that resisted Thomas's attempts to pry it open. Frustrated but determined, he decided to take it to a local locksmith who specialized in antique locks. The locksmith, an elderly man named Mr. Alfred Griffin, was intrigued by the box and its unusual design. Mr. Griffin worked diligently, using his skill and experience to open the lock without damaging the box. As the padlock clicked open, Thomas's anticipation grew. Inside the box, he found a collection of old documents, yellowed with age and bound together with a faded ribbon. There were also several old photographs, some of which depicted the mansion and its grounds, as well as portraits of the Hawthorne family. The documents appeared to be diaries or journals, written in an elegant but somewhat archaic script. Thomas began to translate the writings, which detailed disturbing rituals and practices. The diaries spoke of ceremonies held in the mansion's basement, involving strange symbols and invocations. The entries were filled with references to the Dark One and the awakening of the ancient power, which seemed to align with the eerie atmosphere Thomas had felt in the basement. Among the photographs, Thomas found one that stood out: a portrait of Elizabeth Hawthorne. She was a striking young woman with a somber expression, her eyes seeming to follow him wherever he looked. Her gaze was unsettling, as though she was trying to communicate a hidden truth from beyond the grave. The more Thomas read, the clearer it became that the Hawthorne family had been involved in something deeply sinister. The documents described how the family sought to harness dark forces to achieve immortality and immense power. The rituals were performed in secrecy, and the family's obsession with their dark pursuits had led to their eventual downfall. Thomas's investigation was taking a toll on him, both physically and emotionally. The sense of dread that clung to him whenever he thought about the mansion and the documents was becoming overwhelming. He found it difficult to sleep, plagued by nightmares of shadowy figures and cryptic symbols. Determined to uncover more, Thomas visited the town's historical society, hoping to find additional clues about the Hawthorne family and their activities. The society was housed in an old brick building with a musty, historical atmosphere. He spoke with Dr. Emily Carter, a historian with a deep knowledge of Blackwood's past. Dr. Carter was intrigued by Thomas's findings and agreed to help him research the Hawthorne family further. She provided Thomas with access to additional archives and Old Town records, which revealed that the family had been involved in numerous scandals and controversies. Their reputation had been marred by accusations of madness and occult practices, but concrete evidence had always been elusive.
As Thomas and Dr. Carter delved deeper into the archives, they discovered that several people connected to the Hawthornes had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. These disappearances seemed to coincide with the family's darkest rituals, suggesting a pattern of malevolence and secrecy. One evening, while going through some old newspapers, Thomas came across a chilling article from the early 1900s. It described a series of unexplained events in Blackwood, including reports of strange lights and sounds emanating from the Hawthorne mansion. The article also mentioned sightings of a shadowy figure lurking around the mansion, further fueling the town's lore about the house being haunted. The article referenced a local legend about a ritual of darkness performed by the Hawthornes, which was said to involve the sacrifice of innocent lives to summon a dark entity. The legend claimed that the entity would grant immense power but at a great cost, leading to the family's eventual downfall. With this new information, Thomas felt that he was getting closer to understanding the full extent of the Hawthornes' activities. He decided to return to the mansion and conduct a more thorough investigation of the basement. He hoped to find more evidence that could shed light on the dark rituals described in the documents and the town's legends. That night, Thomas entered the mansion with renewed determination. Armed with a flashlight and his camera, he carefully examined every inch of the basement, paying close attention to any additional clues that might have been overlooked. As he searched, he discovered hidden compartments and secret passageways that seemed to have been deliberately concealed. One particular discovery caught his attention: a series of ancient symbols etched into the walls of a small, hidden chamber. The symbols were similar to those found in the documents and on the altar, and they seemed to form a complex pattern that might be related to the rituals described. Thomas took detailed photographs of the symbols, hoping that they might provide further insight into the nature of the dark forces the Hawthornes had sought to control. As Thomas left the mansion, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The sensation was unsettling, and he wondered if the mansion's dark history was beginning to affect him more than he realized. Despite his growing unease, he knew that he was on the verge of uncovering a truth that had been hidden for far too long. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but Thomas knew that there was still much more to discover. The dark secret of Blackwood was far from being fully revealed, and he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter where it might lead. Chapter 4: The Unseen Presence. Thomas Hale's obsession with the Hawthorne mansion and its dark secrets was consuming his every waking moment. His nights were plagued by unsettling dreams, and his days were filled with an eerie sense of being watched. Despite the growing unease, he remained resolute in his quest to uncover the truth behind Blackwood's shadows. The more Thomas delved into the mansion's history, the clearer it became that something deeply malevolent had taken root in Blackwood. The ancient symbols and the rituals described in the documents painted a picture of a family entangled in a dark pact that went beyond the boundaries of human understanding. Determined to gain more insight into the Hawthorne family's activities, Thomas decided to reach out to the few remaining residents of Blackwood who might have first-hand knowledge of the mansion's past. One such resident was Old Man Riley, a reclusive individual who lived on the outskirts of town and was rumored to have known the Hawthornes personally. Thomas made his way to Riley's rundown house, a small, weathered cottage surrounded by overgrown vegetation. The house had an air of neglect and abandonment, much like the mansion itself. As Thomas approached, he could see Riley through the grimy window, hunched over an old wooden table. When Thomas knocked on the door, Riley hesitated before opening it. The old man's eyes were wary, and his voice was rough, as though he hadn't spoken to anyone in years. Thomas introduced himself and explained his interest in the Hawthorne mansion, hoping that Riley might have some valuable information. Riley was initially reluctant to speak, But as Thomas mentioned the mysterious symbols and rituals, the old man's demeanor changed. He seemed to grow more agitated, his eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. Riley finally agreed to share what he knew, but only if Thomas promised to keep their conversation confidential.
Riley recounted his experiences with the Hawthorns, describing how he had worked for them as a young man. He spoke of the family's eccentricities and their obsession with the occult. Riley revealed that the Hawthorns had conducted secret ceremonies in the mansion's basement, often involving strange artifacts and rituals that he couldn't fully comprehend. One night, Riley witnessed a particularly disturbing event. He had been delivering supplies to the mansion when he overheard the sounds of chanting and eerie music emanating from the basement. He had seen shadowy figures moving through the house and felt an oppressive sense of dread that he could never forget. According to Riley, the family's obsession with their dark rituals had led to a series of tragic events. Several of their staff had disappeared, and rumors circulated that they had been sacrificed in the name of their dark pursuits. Riley himself had narrowly escaped a similar fate when he accidentally stumbled upon one of the ceremonies. Thomas listened intently, taking notes as Riley spoke. The old man's account added a new layer of depth to the mystery, confirming some of the suspicions Thomas had developed during his investigation. Riley's first-hand experience with the Hawthorns provided crucial insights into the family's dark practices and the atmosphere of fear that had surrounded them. As the sun began to set, Thomas thanked Riley for his cooperation and left the old man's cottage. The information he had gathered was both enlightening and troubling. The connection between the family's rituals and the disappearances in Blackwood was becoming clearer, but the full extent of the dark forces at play remained elusive. Returning to the mansion, Thomas felt an increased sense of urgency. He was convinced that the key to unraveling the mystery lay within the mansion's walls. The journal, the hidden chamber, and Riley's account had provided valuable clues, but there was still much more to discover. That evening, Thomas revisited the basement, determined to conduct a more thorough examination of the hidden chamber and the ancient symbols. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to grow heavier, and strange noises echoed through the corridors. Thomas's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He could hear faint whispers and soft, rhythmic thumping that seemed to come from all directions. The sensations were disorienting, and Thomas felt as though he was being drawn into the darkness itself. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, and a chilling breeze swept through the basement. Thomas's flashlight went out, plunging him into darkness. His heart raced as he fumbled to relight it, and when the beam finally returned, he was confronted with a terrifying sight. The symbols on the walls seemed to writhe and shift, as if they were alive. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and the temperature dropped drastically. Thomas's breath came in visible puffs, and he could feel a presence moving around him, unseen but palpable. In a panic, Thomas grabbed the box containing the documents and fled the basement. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to follow him, and he felt a cold grip on his shoulders as he climbed the stairs. When he finally emerged into the night air, he was shaken but resolute. The encounter had only strengthened his resolve to uncover the truth. The unseen presence and the shifting symbols were clear signs that the mansion's dark secrets were far from fully revealed. Thomas knew that he was getting closer to understanding the true nature of the Hawthorn family's activities and the malevolent forces they had unleashed. As he reviewed his notes and photographs, Thomas felt a renewed sense of determination. The answers he sought were within reach, and he was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The darkness of the mansion held many secrets, and Thomas was committed to unraveling them, no matter how terrifying the truth might be. Chapter 5. The Awakening Shadow. The days following Thomas Hale's harrowing experience in the basement were marked by a growing sense of urgency. The chilling encounter with the unseen presence had left him with an undeniable feeling that the dark forces he was dealing with were not merely historical curiosities, but very real and active threats. The mansion's aura of malevolence seemed to be intensifying, and Thomas knew that he had to push forward in his investigation, despite the increasing danger. Thomas's nights were filled with vivid nightmares, visions of shadowy figures and cryptic symbols merging into a swirling maelstrom of darkness. During the day, he felt an inexplicable fatigue, as though the mansion's darkness was seeping into his very being. Yet, despite these overwhelming sensations, he pressed on with renewed determination.
Determined to understand the nature of the dark forces he was dealing with, Thomas decided to consult with an expert in the occult. He reached out to Dr. Marcus Van Holt, a renowned scholar of ancient rituals and supernatural phenomena. Dr. Van Holt had a reputation for investigating unexplained occurrences and had authored several books on the subject. Dr. Van Holt agreed to meet with Thomas and review the materials he had gathered. They arranged to meet in a secluded library, filled with ancient texts and rare manuscripts. The atmosphere was scholarly, but there was an undercurrent of tension as they began to discuss the Hawthorne Mansion and its dark secrets. Thomas presented Dr. Van Holt with the documents, photographs, and detailed notes he had collected. Dr. Van Holt carefully examined each piece, his expression growing increasingly serious. The scholar's knowledge of occult symbols and ancient rituals provided a new perspective on the findings. Dr. Van Holt identified some of the symbols as belonging to a specific type of dark ritual known as the Awakening. According to him, these rituals were designed to summon and harness otherworldly entities, often at great personal and societal cost. The goal was to awaken ancient powers or entities that lay dormant, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. As they reviewed the symbols, Dr. Van Holt revealed that the Hawthorne's rituals were part of a broader tradition of occult practices aimed at gaining control over dark forces. The descriptions in the documents about summoning the Dark One and achieving immortality were consistent with this type of ritual. The scholar's insights confirmed that the Hawthornes had been deeply involved in dangerous and forbidden practices. Dr. Van Holt also pointed out a crucial detail in the photographs: the presence of an old, weathered book on one of the mansion's altars. This book appeared to be a key component of the rituals and might contain further information about the nature of the dark entity they had sought to summon. Armed with this new knowledge, Thomas decided to return to the mansion with Dr. Van Holt. They planned to search for the book and any additional clues that might reveal the true extent of the Hawthorne's dark pursuits. The two men made their way to the mansion, their path illuminated by the waning light of dusk. Upon entering the mansion, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt proceeded to the basement. The oppressive atmosphere was even more palpable than before, and the temperature seemed to drop with each step. The basement's darkness seemed to pulse with an almost sentient awareness, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt examined the hidden chamber and the symbols with renewed focus. They used specialized equipment to analyze the symbols and attempted to uncover any hidden mechanisms or compartments that might contain additional information. The eerie silence was occasionally broken by unsettling creaks and distant echoes. As they worked, Thomas noticed a hidden door at the back of the chamber that he had previously missed. The door was concealed by a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, suggesting that it had not been opened in many years. With great effort, they managed to pry it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading further down. The staircase descended into a deeper, more foreboding part of the basement. The air grew colder and heavier, and the darkness seemed to thicken. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt descended cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive gloom. At the bottom of the staircase, they discovered a small, dimly lit room filled with ancient artifacts and dusty tomes. The room was cluttered with strange objects: ceremonial daggers, ornate vials, and twisted figurines. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, rested the old, weathered book from the photograph. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt approached the book with a mix of awe and trepidation. The cover was embossed with arcane symbols, and the pages were filled with handwritten notes and diagrams related to the rituals described in the documents. The book appeared to be a crucial piece of the puzzle. As they examined the book, they found detailed instructions for performing the rituals, including descriptions of the entities to be summoned and the methods for controlling them. The rituals involved complex incantations and the use of specific artifacts, many of which were present in the room. Dr. Van Holt's expertise proved invaluable as he translated some of the more cryptic passages. He explained that the rituals were designed to open a gateway to another realm, allowing the summoned entities to exert their influence over the material world. The rituals also included protective measures to prevent the entities from escaping control, but it was clear that the Hawthorns had been willing to take immense risks in their pursuit of power. Thomas's hands trembled as he realized the full extent of the danger the Hawthorns had unleashed. The book contained evidence of their attempts to summon and control a dark entity, and it was evident that their actions had left a lasting imprint on the mansion. As they prepared to leave the mansion, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt felt a renewed sense of urgency. The knowledge they had gained was both enlightening and alarming, and they knew that the dark forces the Hawthorns had sought to control were still very real. The mansion's oppressive atmosphere and the sensations of being watched were constant reminders that they were dealing with forces beyond their understanding. With the book in hand and their knowledge expanded, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt left the mansion, determined to continue their investigation and uncover the full truth behind the Hawthorn family's dark legacy. Chapter 6. The Cursed Ritual. The revelation of the ancient book's contents had deepened Thomas Hale's understanding of the dark forces at play within the Hawthorn mansion. The knowledge he had gained from Dr. Van Holt about the ritualistic practices of the Hawthorns was both terrifying and illuminating. As they left the mansion, Thomas felt the weight of their discoveries pressing heavily upon him. The stakes were higher than ever, and the urgency to uncover the truth had never been greater. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt spent the following days poring over the book, analyzing its contents, and cross-referencing with other historical records and occult texts. The more they studied, the clearer it became that the Hawthorns had been involved in a highly dangerous and forbidden practice. The rituals described in the book were not just attempts to summon dark entities. They were efforts to bind these entities to their will, with potentially catastrophic consequences for anyone who crossed their path. One key detail emerged from their research. The Hawthorns had sought to summon an entity known as the Black Herald, a being of immense power and malevolence. The book detailed elaborate rituals designed to open a gateway between the mortal world and the realm of the Black Herald, with the intention of harnessing its power for their own purposes. The rituals involved the use of specific artifacts, including the ceremonial daggers and vials found in the basement, and required precise timing and alignment of astrological events. The book also contained references to a cursed ritual that had gone horribly wrong. According to the text, this ritual had been an attempt to further bind the Black Herald, but it had instead led to an uncontrollable surge of dark energy that wreaked havoc on the mansion and its inhabitants. The Hawthorns' obsession with controlling this dark force had ultimately resulted in their own undoing. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt's findings indicated that the mansion had become a focal point of supernatural activity, with the Black Herald's influence lingering in the shadows. The oppressive atmosphere and the sense of being watched that Thomas had experienced were likely manifestations of this lingering presence. To gain further insight, Thomas decided to revisit the mansion and conduct a more thorough investigation of the artifacts and symbols described in the book. Armed with new knowledge and a sense of purpose, he and Dr. Van Holt returned to Blackwood. Their return to the mansion was met with an even stronger sense of foreboding. The mansion seemed to have grown darker and more oppressive, as if reacting to their renewed presence. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the silence was punctuated by eerie creaks and whispers. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt made their way back to the hidden chamber in the basement, determined to examine the artifacts and symbols in greater detail. They carefully documented each item, noting its significance according to the book. The ceremonial daggers, vials, and figurines were meticulously analyzed for any traces of dark energy or supernatural residue. As they worked, Thomas noticed that some of the symbols on the walls appeared to be shifting and changing, just as he had seen during his previous visit. The phenomenon was unsettling, and it seemed to confirm that the dark forces were still active within the mansion. In their investigation, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt uncovered a hidden compartment behind one of the walls. Inside, they found a set of old, dusty journals that appeared to belong to the Hawthorne family. The journals detailed the family's activities and experiences with the dark rituals, offering a first-hand account of their descent into madness.
One particular journal entry stood out. It described a night when the Hawthornes performed the cursed ritual in a desperate attempt to regain control over the Black Herald. The ritual had been conducted during a rare astronomical event, and the entry detailed the chaotic and horrifying aftermath. The family's once grand home had been plunged into darkness, and they had witnessed terrifying visions of the otherworldly entities they had tried to summon. The entry ended with a frantic plea for help and an ominous warning about the consequences of their actions. As Thomas and Dr. Van Holt read through the journals, they realized that the Hawthornes' failure to control the Black Herald had resulted in a powerful curse that had been left behind. The curse seemed to have bound the dark entity to the mansion, causing the malevolent presence that Thomas had sensed. The discovery of the journals provided valuable insights but also added to the urgency of their mission. The lingering curse and the presence of the Black Herald meant that the mansion was still a hotspot for supernatural activity, and the risk of encountering the dark forces was ever present. Determined to find a solution, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt decided to perform a ritual of their own. They hoped to use the knowledge they had gained to counteract the curse and banish the dark entity from the mansion. The ritual would involve the use of specific protective artifacts and incantations designed to seal off the supernatural gateway and neutralize the lingering presence of the Black Herald. As night fell, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt prepared for the ritual. The basement was set up with the necessary artifacts, and they carefully followed the instructions outlined in the book. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and the darkness seemed to close in around them. With the ritual underway, the air grew thick with an otherworldly energy. Strange sounds echoed through the mansion, and the oppressive darkness seemed to intensify. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt remained focused, their voices steady as they recited the incantations and performed the required actions. The culmination of the ritual was marked by a blinding flash of light, followed by a sudden silence. The temperature in the basement seemed to normalize, and the oppressive sense of darkness lifted. The ritual had been completed, but Thomas and Dr. Van Holt knew that the true test of its success would be in the days to come. As they left the mansion, they felt a sense of cautious optimism. The ritual had been performed with precision, and the dark forces seemed to have been temporarily subdued. However, the nature of the curse and the lingering presence of the Black Herald meant that the mansion's dark secrets were far from fully resolved. With their immediate task completed, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt were prepared to continue their investigation and seek additional ways to ensure that the dark forces remained under control. The Hawthorne Mansion's dark legacy had revealed itself to be more complex and dangerous than they had initially imagined, but their determination to uncover the truth remained unwavering. Chapter 7. The Last Confrontation. With the ritual complete and the immediate danger seemingly subdued, Thomas Hale and Dr. Marcus Van Holt felt a brief moment of relief. The oppressive darkness that had pervaded the mansion seemed to lift, but they knew that their work was far from finished. The Hawthorne Mansion still held many secrets, and the dark entity they had confronted was only part of the mystery. Over the following days, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt continued to monitor the mansion and the surrounding area, searching for any signs of residual dark energy or supernatural activity. They conducted thorough inspections and consulted with additional experts to ensure that the curse had been fully addressed. However, despite their efforts, the mansion remained an enigmatic and unsettling place. Thomas found himself haunted by recurring dreams and disturbing visions. In these dreams, the Black Herald loomed larger than life, its malevolent presence more tangible than ever. The dreams left him with a profound sense of unease, as though the dark entity was still attempting to exert its influence over him. In an effort to understand these disturbing experiences, Thomas decided to delve deeper into the mansion's history. He conducted extensive research into the Hawthorne family's past, uncovering more details about their activities and the origins of their dark pursuits. He discovered that the family's obsession with the occult had begun generations earlier and that their practices had escalated over time. The deeper Thomas dug, the more he realized that the Hawthorns' quest for power and immortality had been fueled by a deep-seated fear of death and the unknown. Their desire to control the Black Herald had been driven by an overwhelming need to conquer their own mortality. The family's dark practices were not just about power, but also about escaping the inevitability of death. Armed with this understanding, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt devised a plan to confront the remaining aspects of the curse and ensure that the Black Herald's influence was permanently eradicated. They decided to perform one final ritual to seal off the dark entity's remaining connection to the mansion and prevent any further supernatural disturbances. The ritual would involve invoking protective forces and using powerful artifacts to create a barrier that would permanently isolate the dark entity from the mortal realm. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt prepared meticulously, gathering the necessary materials and setting up the ritual space with great care. As the night of the ritual approached, the tension in the mansion was palpable. The atmosphere seemed to grow thicker, and the sense of being watched returned with a renewed intensity. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt felt an almost tangible weight of impending confrontation. On the night of the ritual, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt entered the mansion's basement, where the previous ritual had taken place. They began by carefully arranging the protective artifacts and drawing complex symbols on the floor. The air was charged with an eerie energy, and the darkness seemed to press in on them. As they commenced the ritual, they recited the incantations with unwavering focus. The atmosphere in the basement grew increasingly charged, and strange phenomena began to manifest. Shadows flickered and twisted, and distant whispers filled the air. It was as if the Black Herald was reacting to their presence, attempting to resist the final sealing of its influence. Despite the resistance, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt pressed on. They maintained their concentration and continued to perform the ritual's complex steps. The intensity of the energy in the basement reached a crescendo, and a blinding flash of light filled the room. The darkness seemed to recede, and an overwhelming silence followed. The ritual's completion was marked by a sudden stillness. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the sense of being watched disappeared. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that they had taken significant steps to address the dark entity's influence. The next morning, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt conducted a thorough inspection of the mansion. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, and the sense of unease had lifted. The mansion felt different, as though a weight had been lifted from its walls. However, they remained cautious, knowing that the true test of their efforts would be in the long term. Thomas's experiences in the mansion had changed him profoundly. The encounter with the Black Herald and the investigation into the Hawthorne family's dark legacy had left an indelible mark on him. He had confronted the darkness head-on and emerged with a deeper understanding of the forces that lay beyond the veil of reality. Dr. Van Holt, too, was affected by the ordeal. His expertise in the occult had been put to the ultimate test, and he had faced the terrifying reality of dark forces with courage and resolve. The experience had reinforced his belief in the importance of confronting and understanding the supernatural, no matter how daunting it might be. As Thomas and Dr. Van Holt prepared to leave the mansion for the final time, they took one last look at the place that had been the center of their investigation. The mansion, once a symbol of darkness and danger, now seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. The darkness that had once lurked within its walls had been confronted, and the path forward seemed clearer. With the mansion's dark legacy partially resolved, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt knew that their journey was far from over. The investigation had provided valuable insights into the nature of dark forces and the human obsession with control and immortality. It had also shown the importance of confronting and understanding the unknown, no matter how unsettling it might be. As they left the mansion and looked toward the horizon, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt felt a sense of closure and determination. Their confrontation with the Black Herald had been a harrowing ordeal, but it had also been a testament to their courage and resolve. The darkness they had faced had been formidable, but their efforts had made a difference.
The mansion would always hold its dark secrets, but Thomas and Dr. Van Holt had faced those secrets with bravery and had taken significant steps to address the lingering presence of malevolent forces. The journey had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it had ultimately led to a deeper understanding of the mysteries that lay hidden in the shadows. Chapter 8. The Final Revelation. With the mansion's dark legacy seemingly addressed and the immediate threat of the Black Herald subdued, Thomas Hale and Dr. Marcus Van Holt faced the final phase of their investigation. As they prepared to leave the Hawthorne mansion for the last time, they knew there was one final piece of the puzzle that needed to be uncovered. The true nature of the dark entity and its connection to the Hawthorne family had to be fully understood to ensure that their efforts had truly resolved the situation. Thomas was particularly haunted by the cryptic messages in the ancient book they had found. There were passages that seemed to hint at a deeper, more sinister purpose behind the Hawthorne's dark rituals. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the mansion's true secret might still be hidden away, waiting to be discovered. As a last resort, Thomas and Dr. Van Holt decided to consult a renowned occult historian who specialized in ancient and forbidden knowledge. Dr. Lydia Bennett had a reputation for her expertise in unraveling the mysteries of dark practices and had previously helped other researchers in their quests for understanding supernatural phenomena. Dr. Bennett agreed to meet them at a secure location to discuss their findings. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt provided her with all the information they had gathered, including the ancient book, the journals, and their notes from the rituals. Dr. Bennett carefully examined the materials, her eyes narrowing as she read through the ancient text. After hours of analysis, Dr. Bennett made a startling revelation. The Black Herald was not just a single entity, but was part of a larger network of dark forces known as the Inverted Realms. This network consisted of multiple malevolent entities that operated through complex rituals and curses, seeking to influence the mortal world. The Hawthorne family had inadvertently tapped into this network through their rituals, which had connected them to the Black Herald. The family's attempts to control the dark entity had led to a catastrophic imbalance, affecting not only their mansion but also the surrounding area. The curse and the malevolent influence they had experienced were part of a larger, more intricate design. Dr. Bennett explained that the mansion had been a focal point for these dark forces, acting as a conduit for their influence. The rituals performed by the Hawthornes had opened a gateway to the Inverted Realms, allowing the dark entities to exert their power and create disturbances in the mortal realm. To truly resolve the situation, Dr. Bennett recommended a final, comprehensive ritual designed to sever the connection between the mansion and the Inverted Realms. This ritual would involve a complex series of steps, including the use of rare artifacts and ancient incantations. It would require precise timing and coordination to ensure that the dark entities were completely cut off from their influence on the mortal world. Thomas and Dr. Van Holt, determined to see the investigation through to its conclusion, agreed to perform the final ritual with Dr. Bennett's guidance. They returned to the Hawthorne mansion, where they prepared for the complex ceremony. The mansion, though less oppressive than before, still carried an aura of unease, a reminder of the dark forces that had once resided within. As the night of the final ritual approached, Thomas, Dr. Van Holt, and Dr. Bennett worked tirelessly to gather the necessary artifacts and prepare the ritual space. They set up an intricate array of symbols and protective barriers, ensuring that everything was in place for the ritual's success. When the ritual began, the air was charged with an intense energy. The participants chanted ancient incantations and performed elaborate gestures, their voices resonating through the mansion's empty halls. The ritual's complexity and power created a profound sense of tension, as though the very fabric of reality was being tested. The culmination of the ritual was marked by a powerful surge of light and energy that filled the mansion. Thomas felt an overwhelming sense of release, as if the dark forces that had plagued the mansion were being driven away. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the sense of being watched finally dissipated. After the ritual was complete, Thomas, Dr. Van Holt, and Dr. Bennett conducted a final inspection of the mansion. The change was palpable. The mansion felt lighter, and the lingering sense of malevolence was gone. The final ritual had successfully severed the connection to the Inverted Realms, ensuring that the dark entities could no longer influence the mortal world through the mansion. As they prepared to leave, Thomas reflected on the journey he had undertaken. The investigation into the Hawthorne mansion had been a harrowing and challenging experience, but it had also been a profound exploration of the nature of dark forces and human obsession. The revelations about the inverted realms had added a new dimension to his understanding of the supernatural, highlighting the intricate and dangerous interplay between different realms. Dr. Van Holt and Dr. Bennett shared Thomas's sense of accomplishment, but they also acknowledged the ongoing importance of vigilance. The dark forces they had confronted were part of a larger, more complex network, and the need to remain aware of their influence was crucial for ensuring that such malevolent entities did not resurface. As they left the mansion, Thomas, Dr. Van Holt, and Dr. Bennett knew that their work was not truly finished. The investigation had provided valuable insights and had resolved the immediate threats, but the mysteries of the supernatural world were vast and ever-changing. Their experience had deepened their commitment to understanding and confronting the unknown, and they were prepared to continue their exploration of the dark and enigmatic aspects of reality. The Hawthorne Mansion, once a symbol of darkness and danger, now stood as a testament to the courage and determination of those who faced its secrets. The final revelation had brought closure to the investigation, but it also opened the door to new questions and challenges. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had ultimately led to a deeper understanding of the forces that lay hidden in the shadows. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.